Alright, I guess we should get this started. My name's Daniel Dean.
And I'm Vaughn Woods.
And this is our game, No More Mistakes Arcade. So, we just have a bit of a game overview here, where we kind of we're going to discuss more of our game description, what platform we're going to be using, and how the game's going to kind of flow.
So basic game description is that players will have questions that are from their teacher, and their overall goal is to answer as many of those questions as correctly as possible. And they'll have a set amount of time to play the arcade games and also complete the questions. The more questions they answered incorrectly, the less time you get to play the arcade games, and if the player answers a series of questions in a row correctly, they will be awarded points. And the points that they earn can be used to unlock new games. So points can either be used immediately or saved for more desirable games that might be locked.
So the platform we're going to use, the one that we've chosen to use, will be done more from like a PC, from any kind of computer. One of the reasons we really chose to use this is that what most schools have is an actual PC, or a place where these students are going to have access to computers, and where this game is going to be geared towards more of a student than anyone else. We figured that these people should have access to computers so they can play this game. Other than that, if they don't have computers, some people have tablets, iPads. If not that, then we're going to try to do something with a mobile version where people can use their smartphones, have access to this game, participate, and play as well.
So for the game flow, the game's mainly going to be computer based, so you're mainly going to be playing it with the mouse and keyboard. So the mouse cursor is used to select items, and it can highlight objects by hovering the cursor over the object. And left click will bring up a menu, and you can choose actions from that menu. And for the camera, the player will right click and hold while moving the mouse. And WSAD keys will just be used to move the character, which is what most games have. And the interaction model is going to be point and click, using the mouse cursor to hover over the items. And then you can select them with a left click, and selecting an action from the pop-up menu as well. And the mouse will have two functions: to select items and to move the camera. And the player will select items with a left click, and if the player right clicks and holds, they will have control of the camera and also move in the direction of the camera. So pretty simple controls.
Our next section will be the game mechanics. Here we're going to kind of go over the objectives, some of the rules, give an example of our user interface, give some examples of some gameplay, how it's going to kind of feel, and then some of the core mechanics we're going to be using to go along with the game. So the objectives, players are going to have a bunch of questions that are going to be asked by their teacher. These are going to come up, and they're going to have a set amount of time to answer all these questions. And based on their answers, like whether or not they get them correct, whether they miss some, everything's going to be tallied. And at the end of their session, they're going to have a little report card shown to them, showing which ones they've answered correctly, which ones they've answered incorrectly, and then they're going to be awarded some points. And then based off of these points, that's going to be their currency to use on other things inside the game world, such as like arcade games. So they can go into one of the other game modes, spend these coins, and then play some arcade games.
Alright, so rules. We had some basic rules for our game. So you're not really going to have much of a choice on how you can approach challenges. You will have to approach challenges in a sequence. And so there's really only going to be one way you can approach these challenges, and it's to go to the research station and answer all the questions. And so the actions required to complete challenges are pretty simple. Mainly going to be a point and click method where the player will have a number of questions to answer, and they have to pick the correct one. And that's pretty much the only way for the player to progress.
So this is our user interface. It's pretty simple. We didn't want it to be too complex, since a lot of that isn't really going to be the main purpose of the game. The main purpose is for these students to answer questions that are being asked, and subjects that they've been learning about and that the teachers have been teaching them. But as you can see, It's simple. Point click, use the cursor to hover over items. You're going to use it to select items and then move around. So if you wanted to read something, you hover over it with your cursor, click on it. Same with any interactions that you would have with any of the other characters in the game, whether they be NPCs or other players, other physical players that are in the classroom with you. Making some of the movements inside the arcade, moving around, anything that you want to do. And then we wanted it to be more realistic. We didn't want it to get too much into the way of of what our game world was. So we just kind of decided to make it super simple.
So gameplay is going to be pretty simple as well. Gameplay is really going to be centered around the reward system, where players can work on answering questions posted by the teacher, and the questions will be disguised as the research that the player is gathering. And once research missions are completing, the player receives a reward for the percentage of questions answered correctly. And the rewards are just going to be motivation, so the player does not feel like they're being dragged along through the game. And then we're going to use a save file to save the game, and the player won't be able to save the game when they're in the middle of playing, but they'll have the option of saving once they've finished their challenges, and it can be done through the start menu and the save station.
So the core mechanics of the games that we're going to be using, it's going to be a variety of some of the 5 major mechanics types that we've discussed in our book. Internal economies. Players are going to have coins. These are going to be the currency that they're going to receive for completing research tasks. When they complete research tasks, they're going to be rewarded a coin. The coin is going to be used in the arcade, and this is where they're going to be able to purchase anything they'd like. Another thing that we were kind of thinking about as far as characters of the player is you might be able to use some of these as purchasing items inside of the store for your avatar. So as you're going along, if there's like a shirt or something that you want to purchase, you want to buy, save up some of those coins and then you can do it. So since the player is tasked with answering questions, progression mechanisms will be used, and these questions are going to be presented in specific orders. Since they're going to be posted in these specific orders, they're not going to have much of a chance or ability to change any of the questions. So they're just going to have to go from beginning to last, and that's going to pretty much be the same for everybody. Another mechanic is going to be the social interactions. Everybody is going to have their own avatar inside the game, and when they're inside the game, they can have some interactions with each other in class. So it's not just going to be between the player and what's happening in the game, but they can have social interactions with each other as well.
So this is going to be the story, settings, and character, just a basic overview of all of them. So for our story, it's mainly going to be pretty linear, and every character is going to be a representation of the player. And our students in the class is going to be the main focus for them is to learn. And the game will have a pretty simple narrative. There's going to be a bit of mission briefing in the beginning, so they know what they're doing. And there isn't really much transitional material besides just explaining to the player to know what they're doing and the task they need to complete. And each student is going to answer the questions they're posted from their teacher, and it can, based on whether they answer the question correctly or incorrectly, it's going to affect the player's score. And if they get a pretty high score, they can get some rewards that they can receive as well. So the questions they're going to have are mainly just going to be research tasks that can be like science, English based, anything like that. So it can include sampling different types of rocks with different answers to the questions being represented by these rocks, and it's up to the player to choose the correct rock when the question is asked. And another way that answers can be submitted is through mock chemistry experiments, where the player can choose a number from different chemicals and elements, which are representing the possible answers to add to a flask. So yeah, it's pretty simple.
So our game world gonna be not very huge, not very large. It's going to be a representation of what we want the player to feel. And it's going to be essentially just a classroom where you're going to be learning. But we want it to be kind of like an interactive classroom, not the kind of same old boring classroom, but it's going to be pretty much just a classroom. Uh, Everything's going to be pretty typical classroom stuff. Desk chairs, bookshelves, blackboards, whiteboards, a teacher, everything that kind of goes along with the classroom. But we just kind of want the player to get a feeling of being in a classroom so they can learn. And then outside of that, they're going to go into their research tasks, and they're going to perform their little experiments that are just a disguise for all the questions they need to answer. So they can go on and do what they need to and earn coins and play games.
So our characters of the game, they're essentially going to be the players and how the players are going to be represented. And the roles in the game is to be a student in the game, and they can create their avatar to mimic themselves, look like how they look in real life, or pretty much however they want to look in the game. And the avatars are gonna be distinct to them, so other players can imagine and have an idea of how other players want to be seen. And so pretty much customization is gonna be pretty simple for the avatars. Players are encouraged to customize their avatars, and it's not not a necessity to have the avatar look identical, but that is an option for the players. So for the most part, they're just going to be creating their ideal player character.
All right, now we're going to just do a little bit of a conclusion, kind of some of the societal effects that we believe might come from this game, positive and negative, and then why we think this game should be created. So, why we think this might change the player for the better. We feel it'll encourage a person to study because of the rewards they might receive from the game. So if you're going into the game, the main task for you, the main way you can receive rewards is to answer questions correctly, and the way you answer questions correctly is to study. When you study, study well at least, you're going to do a better job at understanding the material. When you understand the material, you're going to do better at answering all these questions correctly. So we feel that it might do better for the student, and it might be more beneficial to the student in the way that they study. And then when you study better, you do better.
So how can this game affect people for the worse? So our game really isn't going to have very many negative side effects, but we have to consider pretty much every possibility. So really the biggest one is that we have to worry about a player that could study in a way that would not be very beneficial to their learning. So if the player wants to cram as much information as possible just before playing the game, it might have a positive result and do very well answering questions, but this would hurt them in the long run because when a player crams, they don't really retain all that information very well and it gets lost over time. That's pretty counterproductive.
So what are the effects of this game to society? Like we've been saying through this entire presentation, it's supposed to be an aid in teaching. It's supposed to make teaching a little, or not necessarily teaching more fun, but learning more fun, to where the kid isn't, where people are just sitting inside of classrooms behind a teacher while it's sitting there listening to them lecture. But we want to have something more interactive to where the student might have more of a reward in wanting to learn, making learning fun. And then when learning's fun, you really just kind of want to retain all the information. You want to participate. You want to stay focused. And we think this could be a good learning tool for everybody.
And then why should this game be created? So we personally think the game should be created because it can really revolutionize the way students learn in the schools. So we're bringing a pretty fresh new perspective on learning and how the classrooms can function in the future and even in present day. And students can have a pretty entertaining avenue to test their abilities and learn new things. So the teachers can also utilize things in the game and track pretty much every student's progress with these. And it can allow the teacher to know how amazing of a job they're doing in their learning or if they need some help. So no more boring classrooms, and fun, interactive, engaging system that engages in helping students.
All right, well, I hope you enjoyed our presentation once again. My name's Daniel Dean.
And I'm Vaughn Woods.
Had a lot of fun taking your course this year. And thank you very much. We hope you had fun too.
Yeah, thank you.